Let me start by welcoming you. Thanks for being with us today, especially during a busy holiday season. I would like to open the floor to public comment. The public is encouraged to attend and observe board activities. Members of the public are asked to sign in so that the record reflects your presence. You're important to us. Public comments are limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Would anyone from the public like to comment about anything that is not on the agenda?
No?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I'm
You're on,
saying,
Kathy.
I'm on. I just want to say that you guys are fabulous, and you're getting more fabulous every time. I'm really pleased to be here, so thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I totally agree. We are at Wes. Oh, you got a hand up there.
Yeah, sorry, I'm in the corner, so it's kind of hard to see. My name is Wes White. I'm a Salinas resident, co-president of the Salinas Monterey County Homeless Union. And basically, I'm just trying to implore again. We were here a month ago. We brought the California Homeless Union to the board meeting at the Martinez Hall. And the city is still doing sweeps. I don't know what kind of intervention, CHSP can do, but this is kind of the board, the body that feels like the go-between that should be able to say, Selena, she got an addiction, and we're here to intervene. Because they're spending an awful lot of money, millions of dollars to do these sweeps. There's no services available. Law enforcement is the only service that comes. Even when you sign people up, where do you put them? And so now we're avoiding the real conversation of this is already affordable housing. Living in a tent is already affordable housing. In a car, in an RV, that's already affordable housing. They need to be recognized, legitimized, and respected. I mean, we need to stop the sweeps, and there needs to be a force from this body intervening and interjecting, because if you're really in the business of saving lives, start doing it. Please.
Thank you, Wes. And I do appreciate those remarks. I'm sure that many others here in the room appreciate them as well.
Yes.
Any other public comment? Okay, well, then it gets down to the chairperson's comments. Oh, did I miss introductions? I did. Thank you. Do we want to do introductions? There are a lot of people in the room today, so I think it would be a good idea. Let's start with Anna, who just took a bite of her strawberry. Around the board table first, and then around the room.
I'm Anna Folia, and I'm the CEO of Sun Street Centers.
Robin McRae, Community Human Services.
Kurt Shockey, Veterans Transition Center.
Alexa Johnson, Housing Resource Center.
Jackie Smith, the Community Health Engagement, formerly known as the Chinatown Community Learning Center.
Marisol Vasquez, Transitional Housing Case Manager for the Housing First for YWCA Monterey County.
Christine Duncan, CU, YWCA Monterey County.
Dana Cleary with GCF.
Betsy Wilson with Penn Housing. Christina Soto, Community Solutions.
Enrique Rela, San Benito County.
Barbara Mitchell, Interim Incorporated.
Jill Allen, Dorothy's Place.
Elliot Robinson, Interim Executive Officer.
Okay, if we could start with Nicole and then just work around her.
Nicole Sakihara with the Homeless Coalition. Katrina McKenzie with the Homeless Coalition.
Derek Free, Homeless Coalition.
Elizabeth Modelania, Middlebury Institute. Rose Allen with the Middlebury Institute.
Kathy Wilden, Fund for Homeless Women.
Marion Penn, Fund for Homeless Women.
Sean Stone, Senior Program Officer at Community Human Services.
Anastasia Wyatt, County Monterey.
I'm Jorge Ruiz with CISO, Central Coast Center for Independent Living.
Stacey Algeba Perkins, ED at Gathering for Women.
Mary Eileen Canary, Gathering for Women.
Dominic Durso with Assemblymember Remus's office.
Roxanne Wilson from the Homeless Coalition.
Wes White from Salinas, Monterey County Homeless Union.
Good McCall from Salinas.
Thank you, everyone. I hope that the guests, the visitors, have signed in. I think that's really important that we acknowledge your presence here. And I will just say for my comments, I think that our last 6 months of business in the coalition has been absolutely remarkable. And I am actually going to ask staff here for our next meeting, for the January meeting, to compile a list of accomplishments that we have done in the first half of our year. I think it's a good idea that we review that. and inspire ourselves to keep going with some of the actions that are just basically in their baby steps, but other things that have been tried and completed, and understand that we actually do have the power, if we work collectively, to make change in homelessness in San Benito and Monterey counties. And the mindset of change makers is very different than the mindset of people that just feel they need to be present and have face time at a board table. And that's what I think we all aspire to be. Thank you very much. Enjoy your holiday season. You are working to improve lives and enjoying and creating enjoyable holiday seasons for people that may have once had no hope whatsoever. Congratulations and thank you very, very much. Any additions or modifications to today's agenda will be considered now. Hearing nothing, I'll go ahead and move on to approval of the November 20th minutes, which are attached. Has everyone had time to review them? Thank you to coalition staff for getting them out well in advance. If there's no discussion, I will go ahead and call for a motion to approve the minutes. Kirk?
I make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Thank you very much, Kirk. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Anna will second, thank you. Any further discussion of the minutes? All then the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Approval of the minutes passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Our next is an action item. It's a discussion of the draft coalition encampment position paper, and I'm going to turn that over to Elliot.
Okay, at your last board meeting, you asked us, staff, to draft a position paper on encampments. As you can tell from public comment this morning, it's a pretty heavy issue in parts of our community. The sweeping act or cleanup activity that's going on. As a coalition, it's a little bit of both a place that's close to us because we experience the challenges of the frequent cleanups that are happening. And I know many around the table have opinions. I've heard them on different sides of the equation in all candor. My personal opinion is that, cleanups can have a function of, performing a critical public health issue, and they can also be an element of harassment, and there's always a balancing act between the two that sometimes you just have to look at the frequency to sort that out. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to read the draft. If I should read it out loud, it seems like it'll take a long time, but.
Why don't you put it up on the screen in case people.
And so let me read it out loud. This will be, if we adopt it, will be a position paper by the coalition. It's public. We're somewhat of an administrative entity. Again, I'm going to speak a little bit as a person with kind of a long time as administration. Administration is always somewhere in the middle. It's you have to try and synthesize all sorts of voices, but also call out things that are important, just to be clear about.
And please understand, we've developed this draft to be an aid to you in gathering your thoughts. This is not something we're trying to sell to you, to the board. The board will make the ultimate decision on how to modify this and approve it. It needs to be a reflection of the board. Go ahead.
And just recognizing that, amongst all partners, there are many different opinions, and you have to try and do your best to balance out disparate voices. That's kind of another administrative viewpoint I have, that populations generally don't agree, and, a good administrator tries to listen to and synthesize multiple viewpoints and not just represent kind of one side, but try and figure a way to encompass a whole. So.
Hey, Elliot, so it's on page 26.
Oh, yeah, page 26. So the coalition recognizes an individual's basic need for shelter, safety, and community. Additionally, the coalition recognizes that without an adequate supply of housing, too many people living with very low incomes have no local housing options other than living unsheltered. To address this reality of insufficient housing and shelter options, communities, housed and unhoused, along with service providers, public, nonprofit, faith-based, and voluntary, offer resources that can allow survival and opportunities to address critical health and quality of life issues for those living unsheltered and in encampments. It is acknowledged that many encampments in the region originate as a survival response by the community experiencing homelessness, many of whom are awaiting the opportunity to receive assistance. Due to the lack of affordable housing and shelter in the area, many of the people experiencing homelessness spend 6 months or more on various waiting lists. This lack of extremely affordable housing, permanent supportive housing, and emergency shelter space exacerbates the housing crisis and forces local constituents without housing to form their own communities in the form of encampments. The coalition also recognizes the position faced by local jurisdictions, where encampments can accumulate public health and safety hazards, and where many constituents view homelessness as an unwelcome deviance and ask that encampments be removed. In response to those concerns, jurisdictions at times pursue cleanups. In this context, the coalition recognizes the legitimate need of jurisdictions for street cleaning in order to maintain public health and safety for the community. However, the coalition also recognizes that the frequency in which they are conducted has the potential to further exacerbate the vulnerability of populations living without housing. Too often, the cleanups result in the loss of survival and quality of life necessities, including items essential for living unsheltered, important documentation, medications, and valued possessions. Furthermore, there are unintended consequences of those cleanups, most notably the displacement of homeless individuals between jurisdictions and an adverse impact on the relationship between persons experiencing homelessness and the service providers who rely on the trust and respect of these communities. It is the position of the coalition that local jurisdictions, service providers, and the community experiencing homelessness work together to create a more viable solution to the current encampment situation. This includes public disclosure of the specific health and safety concerns being addressed. 2, a multi-step process that first provides encampments tools to clean up an encampment on their own, trash receptacles and hygiene resources such as public restrooms and showers, followed by notice of at least 1 week before a scheduled cleanup if self-help resources do not address the documented health and safety concerns. 3, development of scheduled encampment outreach as partnership between jurisdictions, homeless service providers, public assistance, health services, which includes public health, behavioral health, and medical, and individuals with lived experience. And limiting the frequency of cleanups, particularly when sufficient shelter to provide an alternative to encampment living are unavailable. So that's what we drafted. And I will open it up for comment, edits, thoughts, action, wherever we want to go.
You know, the coalition previously wrote a whole position paper on encampments when Catherine was the executive director. And in response to some specific questions from various jurisdictions, including the city of Salinas and the county. And I'm wondering if that document was reviewed before this one was written.
Yes, I believe so.
Yes.
That we reviewed.
Okay. And I think it would be good to provide that document to coalition members and the public in general as well before we, kind of finalize something on this. One of my concerns is that we have talked about in here that we would need to be providing, trash receptacles, hygiene resources, such as public restrooms and showers. And I remember, and maybe Jill can comment on it, there was, extensive efforts before the health center was open to have portable restrooms in the Chinatown area, which was not successful because it was, I don't know, maybe Robin, maybe, Jill could comment more, difficult to maintain both the safety and the cleanliness of those. So that this paper makes it sound like that we would not support any kind of cleanup of encampments unless these things are provided. And one of them is something we've already tried and found, are we gonna build, permanent restrooms and showers out in encampment areas? And as I said, Jill has more experience with it, but I'm just concerned that we are writing a paper that makes it sound like no cleanups of encampments should be done unless these things are provided. Lastly, I just want to comment, and I think I sent this to both the city of Salinas and the county, that I don't know if I mentioned that I was at an event and, was talking about how I visited Moongate and how fabulous looking Moongate was and how we were going to be getting all these units and what a help this was going to be. And a business person from Salinas was there who then said, Salinas doesn't care about anything else in the city except Chinatown and making that look good, and then sends me all the pictures of the encampments next to a fairly large manufacturing place in Salinas. And then he starts talking about the groundwater pollution, about the trash, about everything that is impacting the business's viability. And this is a very large business in Salinas. And says, so Salinas does these cleanups and a week later they're back. Why aren't they fencing this area off? And so, and talked about kind of the public health impacts of having this encampment right next to this business. So my concern is that this is written in a way where we are saying unless these other things are done, we're not going to support any cleanups. And maybe I'm over-interpreting that, but I'd like to hear from others.
I actually don't interpret it like that because it gives a lot of credit to understanding there's a need for cleanups and such. And over here, it does say to work together with different organizations, service providers, communities. So I do feel that it has the language that we need to work together to bring solutions, not just go out and do cleanups. I think what may be missing also is whenever, if this process were to be followed, the linkages to service providers, to different services, I think it's important in any cleanup, not just the cleanup, but also, hey, we have other information, this is some of the resources, through the help of different service providers. But overall, I think it's well-written.
So, Robin, if you just give me a second, I want to, because Barbara called out the restroom issue, I just wanted to make a quick comment. Yes, we have a lot of experience in the Chinatown encampment with porta potties. And yes, they are problematic. The city has porta potties there now. I don't know if they're experiencing exactly the same challenges that we had. And I don't mean Dorothy's place. The porta potties were actually put there by the Salinas Downtown Community Board. Right. But they are challenging. This paper, however, is not calling out and saying you need to put porta potties. Porta potties are not a good solution for people that are using things regularly. And environmental health in Monterey County will be the first to tell you that they are not a good solution. They are there for a temporary event, like a music festival. They are not there for daily use. And to expect them to function well for that is ludicrous. In Santa Cruz, where they actually had a facility that had restrooms and showers that kind of started out kind of marginal, and that they really tried to make work for years and years and years, has actually shut that facility down in favor of mobile showers and mobile restrooms. And I think that that concept falls very easily within this position paper. We are calling out in the position paper that these needs need to be fulfilled to actually have a successful response to encampments. I don't believe that we're saying we're basically giving an ultimatum that unless you fulfill these needs like this, we are not going to support an effort. I don't believe this position paper says that. Okay, Rob.
Now, I want to debate the differences between a porta potty and a mobile shower because I don't know enough about that. But it seems to me that if the resources that were spent on doing the number of sweeps that have been happening in Salinas were spent on solutions towards finding some ideas that would work to meet individuals' needs to shower and to use the restroom, that would be a better use of resources. I think what's happening is inhumane, frankly. And I understand the public health aspect of it. However, people have basic needs. And so that kind of trumps, for me, a sweep. And I just think that the resources put into sweeps would be better spent making some viable solutions to helping people meet their basic needs. And I'd like to see that as a suggestion in the paper.
Just say that again.
Well, you wordsmith it, because you're good at that, but the resources spent on sweeps and other kinds of intrusions into encampments would be better spent finding viable solutions to meet the basic human needs of people experiencing homelessness.
Anna?
I just want to add in the second paragraph that transitional housing, even though it's not currently popular with federal dollars to provide transitional housing, I want to add to that list of extremely affordable housing, permanent supportive housing, also transitional housing is practically non-existent. And if we have to find other financial resources since government funding doesn't support transition housing, I don't want to forget about it. It's very important for people that are homeless to have that resource.
And I'd like to also add, it's extremely important, in fact, necessary for people that are chronically unsheltered to be able to experience a time of transition before they're successfully placed into sustainable housing. Anybody else at the table with a comment on this?
I think it's good as a philosophical piece, but it's toothless. I don't think work together is definitive enough. I think if you want to have an impact on this, you need to have a timeline and you need to assign responsibilities. The only thing the coalition can do is the first half of the second bullet and the first half of the third bullet. Those we can do. We can offer to take the lead on outreach and encampment tools. But other than that, it's out of our jurisdiction. This would be very easy to just ignore and say thank you for your input, ignored.
Thank you, Kurt. And with that in mind, would you be willing to offer some suggestions about how we could put more teeth into this? I mean, you've offered them here at the table, but I mean,
Sure, I would say let's start with fiscal year. Let's say in the next 6 months, the following actions need to be taken. Why don't we assign public health to the first one, recommend that public health be specifically assigned to do that. We, the coalition, take the lead on 2 and 3 to coordinate with health services, public assistance to have scheduled outreach at regular times and intervals in the encampments. And then the last one is we work to publicize the cleanup frequencies so that these are known. And again, we need to be specific on this. I think as written, it's too vague.
So your points are well taken. I think that as a position paper for the Coalition of Homeless Services Providers, I'm not saying that it needs to be vague, but this is basically declaring where we stand philosophically on this issue. It is not meant to be the document that actually recommends actions, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't be the document that recommends actions. So we need to decide whether we want to go in that direction with this, or whether this just becomes basically the flag in the ground, and then we rally around the flag and make some action happen.
How about we do both? We start with this, and then we say, in the next quarter, we will submit very specific details on how we recommend these be implemented in coordination with public agencies.
Interesting suggestion, Anna.
I would agree, with some street centers, we'll take positions on unpopular issues about liquor licenses, or as an example. And we'll post it on our website, and we'll send the position to local newspapers. And then alongside that, we also have an action plan I mean, we can't control the actions of everyone, but we can control what we want to do as a coalition. And so alongside it, we post it, we share it, and then we create our own action plan of what we're gonna agree to do. It's a separate document.
And I think that there's some merit to that, and, you know, I can see a position paper, like you said, posted on the website, I can see it released to the media, I can see it disseminated through social media, I can see all of that, so that we can get a wider awareness in the community that, oh, this is the Coalition of Homeless Services Providers, this is where they stand before we get in there and start recommending actions. Otherwise, an action document, if it's disseminated in that same way, can cause a lot of reaction. Favorable reaction, unfavorable reaction that you're having to deal with while you're trying to get your action plan going. So, yeah.
So, you know, part of the reason we did this is because of the activity that's happening in Salinas, right? But we've got a bunch of other cities in the county, and then we have the county as well. So, as you were talking, I was thinking, should we, instead of creating an action plan, sort of take, because we've been talking about, well, what is Seaside doing? What is Monterey doing? And trying to figure that out. I mean, do we create some sort of report card for each city and how they relate to this position? Because, you know, part of this is that Salinas keeps saying, oh, you know, we've notified the coalition, as though that means that service providers are coming out right ahead of these sweeps. And that's not real. And so, you know, we've tried to put something together that says, look, this is how we want to participate in what you guys are doing. But each city, the engagement is different. I don't know that we could have an action plan unless it was city specific. So maybe we start with an evaluation of the activities in each city and how they fit in with the paper.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking from the city perspective and the county perspective that, you know, we've got to have everybody's involvement. I remember sitting around the table with Jill and Catherine and, you know, Don Reynolds about, you know, how do we handle the sweeps years ago, right? So that has to happen in order to really have something that's going to function well that we can all work with.
Okay, so any other comments from around the table? And I should say, Jess, you should be at the table.
Oh, okay. Promoted.
So who's the intended audience, and what was going to be out of this paper?
Intended audience is everybody in the San Benito and Monterey County communities. So it isn't just intended to go toward government or go toward other service providers. This is intended for everybody in the community to understand the coalition's stand on encampments.
Yeah. And then what was going to happen with this? Going to be sent someplace, posted someplace?
All of that. We get it out with widest possible dissemination and then work from there to develop action. That's the original intent. But, you know, I should say that within the last 6 months, we've kind of amassed a greater profile in the community. More people know that there's a coalition. More people know that there are service providers coming together at a round table or a rectangular table and actually working on issues. And we're doing this in anticipation of somebody saying, well, what does the coalition think about encampments? We need to let them know ahead of time. We need to let them know now. So any other comments from around the table? I know Elliot's got some comments to make, but I wanted to go around the board members first. Barbara, did you?
Well, if you, this is just minor, but if you actually adopt this paper, I would suggest that you remove the word deviance from paragraph 3 and instead say intrusion or something or other. But the word deviance seems a little,
it's a little triggering for some people.
Yeah, that's a problem. But I also view that if we pass this, that we better have an action plan, as Kurt said, immediately as to what the coalition is doing, because just passing this is not going to do anything. And already we're being criticized for not spending enough time going to encampments. Remember, we talked about, like, how many of us have staff who can really, you know, go out to encampments that many of us don't have. You know, we have some
minor dedicated people to do outreach. And like, I have one on the Salinas side and one for like essentially all of the Monterey Peninsula, of which, the city of Monterey
So
is paying
we're
very
already
little.
studying encampment response. And I think we're gonna hear a little bit more about that today.
But I don't know if we actually have a plan to go with this. And as soon as you put this out, the question is, what is your plan? So my suggestion is that I would be with Kurt, that I would have the plan before I put this out.
Okay? Any other comments from the board? Elliot?
Okay, a few things. So maybe I'll start at the kind of the tail end. First, I want to be clear, this is a position paper for the Coalition of Homeless Services Providers, not for the Continuum of Care. That would be something for the Leadership Council. Different board. So I just want to make sure everyone around this table is clear. This is for the Coalition of Homeless Services Providers side of the house and reflects the position of the provider community on encampments. I think you should be careful about, because there are strong opinions and there are ways bridges get burned, and kind of administrators learn their best how not to burn bridges, because you always have to have a bridge. So that's a concept. And the other point is to think about, kind of, and I'm kind of getting into that plan step. The planning that this really presupposes that would come to us is, well, a jurisdiction, I don't want to single out any, but would say, well, we've asked you to come to the table around the encampment outreach, and you haven't, right? So that's a risk. We put that in there. On the other hand, my position has always been, since I got here, has been an email from someone I don't know who may or may not actually include the coalition on their email does not constitute an email just with a notice, without a phone call, without anything in advance, at 72 hours in advance, does not constitute an effort at coordination, as much as some folks may believe that's coordination. An email saying command performance without kind of scheduling in advance how we're going to work this out.
We're developing a relationship.
We're developing a relationship, another piece, does not constitute coordination. With 72 hours advance notice, there's not a lot that you're going to be able to do with very limited resources. I think the pressure put on the coalition, at some level, might be more apt put on more formal service providers with a lot more resources. Example being, many of the people who we serve really need kind of that clinical behavioral health support or a concrete public health mission. So it's hard for us as kind of, with kind of really introductory outreach staff at some level. And it's a little bit arrogant and I feel bad saying that, but many of our outreach staff are fairly fresh in the world. Are not necessarily clinically trained for a very complex population. So, action plan needs to kind of contemplate at some level, how do we coordinate an encampment response? And if we come out with a position paper, it puts pressure on us, and we don't necessarily have the resources. From my years in social services, I've heard many in the public sector kind of look at a $500,000 contract and say, woohoo, look at how much money we're giving you. On the other hand, that's about in public sector world, that's about maybe 5 FTEs worth of capacity. In the nonprofit world, you might be able to turn that into about 8. So there are not a lot of resources. So part of the action plan, Kurt, I think would beg the question, how do we get more outreach resources? HHAP could be a piece of that, discretionary money, reinvestment, which I think someone brought up, Robin, I think you brought up the reinvestment question. Can we reinvest money so that we can have outreach contingent? I think in terms of, Barbara, your concept of the difficulty of public restrooms and showers, We might be able to solve that by, just by saying, for example, right? Because this isn't a must list, but it's an example, set of examples. So if we specified that, that might take
But
care of
that's
that.
probably the most important, I mean, if you're looking at public health impact, that's probably the most important thing on that list, is sanitation. And Jill may have other thoughts.
So I think that's why.
Sanitation and mental health services.
So if we said, for example, it kind of, it shouldn't be, this is a, you know, kind of a hard barrier, but these are examples that you could pursue, and I see that.
And TikTok. I need to let the rest of the room comment as well.
Toothless. A position paper is relatively toothless, and I would say from the coalition perspective, it's going to be hard to put teeth in there, other than teeth on ourselves, which is we're going to do the encampment outreach, which we're working on. But that would be the tooth, and that would be kind of my set of context. But it's a position paper. It's not an action plan. Action plan would follow, and the action plan for us is going to be on the encampment outreach.
Okay. I just wanted to say, I understand the position paper and an action plan being two completely different things, but maybe could the position paper conclude by stating, this as a coalition, this is what we believe, maybe, you know, we would be able to contribute to kind of help with these issues, and we invite whichever players we think are necessary to join us to come up with more viable solutions to this, you know, to this issue. Basically an action to bring other people to the table, people from different cities, Monterey County, public health, having them come together, just so the public
develop an
sees
action
it.
plan.
So they see that we're saying, we understand there's challenges and kind of holes to what we can do, but if we partner with other communities, we think that we can come up with a realistic solution. That way, if you feel like it's toothless, it has an action kind of at the end, but it gives us time to figure out a more concrete plan in the future.
So what I would see then is kind of a closing that says something, this is how we can help, with coordination and with supporting requests for funding. For specifically the bullets 2 or 3.
Yeah, but you know, we wouldn't be able to fulfill this mission without partnering with our, you know, city and county officials. We would love to invite the groups to come together to come up with
And
a
other
solution.
stakeholders in the
Yeah,
community as well.
what have you, yeah.
Thank you, Alexa. Okay, I will now entertain comment from the gallery, from the rest of the room. Does anybody like to comment on this? Wes?
I think it's a really good start, and thank you for at least making some kind of overt position paper. I'm really pleased and impressed for that. And as a homeless union, we can already verify that quite a few people are already signed up for cars, and that becomes the question: what do we do with everybody who's already received services? Because basically, it still goes back to, well, now you almost just need to protect them from the sweeps. We could build, we just need permission to be somewhere. We could build a better lifestyle, better, you know, make them house trained, and then that way you can place them into programs, and we can do all of that if they have a stable, you know, foundation. And that seems like what you're going for, and we're totally ready to already sign people up. I'm on the phase 2 for the cars entry. So I can put people on the list and get people into housing or whatever this HMIS is supposed to do for people. And it's that meantime of like, now that you've recognized them, they're harmless, not homeless. And that's where we really need to get at is allowing them to just be, permission to be somewhere. And if, you know, like if they have organized space, just trash, poo, and food is in its place, and they're not doing drugs in front of anybody, I think, and if they're signing up for cars, that should be like my immunity, you know, like have them register to vote or something, and then that way they got an actual residency somewhere, you know, Monterey County residents, because that's always the thing. Well, they're transients, but they lived here their whole life. So thank you for what you're doing, I guess, and the Homeless Union will definitely work with you to do it. Can't do the spring on sweeps, but I'm just telling you already, a lot of people are already signed for services, so what happens to everybody once they're already signed up?
you, Wes. Does anyone else wish to comment? Okay, so. all
One
right.
more.
Mary Eileen.
You know, I just really want to say that I really respect the amount of work that this is all about and how painful this issue is for all of the providers, because it's been going on for so long and only getting worse. So I guess I just honor your humanity, and I would really, you know, I'm sitting here thinking I've spent a whole life in public health and in nursing, and I want to do something, I want to help. And I know there's other people in the community too. And so if there was some kind of volunteer corps that was hired, trained, and used as advocates to be able to help all the nonprofits that are suffering. And maybe that could come out of you guys. It could just be your group and train us, educate us. And I'm pretty educated at this point, but I could get a lot more educated. And that's my thought. There is a community out there that cares and wants to do something and feels somewhat powerless. And if you give them direction, an action plan, this is where we need people, will you be able to sign up? I think it would be tremendously helpful.
Just to comment just on that really quickly, this is an observation, just that we don't have the strongest coalition relationship with many of the voluntary organizations that are out there. I mean, I think of Pass the Word Ministry, or I think it's Friends of Gale and Monterey Peninsula. I don't know the folks on Salinas, but we haven't necessarily coordinated that much with the voluntary groups out there. So that's kind of interesting.
Great idea.
Just a few comments. Last year, we developed in San Benito County a committee that we called Homeless Encampment Assessment Response Team. It was HEART, for short. And the members that attended these were monthly or bi-monthly meetings were members of the Health and Human Service Agency, Community Homeless Solutions, other nonprofits. Code enforcement showed up a couple of times. It was hard to get them on the table. County Council, surprising, they were there to help us with technicality language. RMA was also on the table. Even the Sheriff's Department was there on the table. And the whole goal was pretty much what we're talking about. You know, there's, for us to get ample notice if there's a sweep that will be scheduled or a place that needs to get red tagged and such. And we probably met about a year. And the reason why we stopped is because we had nowhere to get into. They kept saying, well, we need services, we need housing. The solution here is housing. And it got a little frustrating that we just didn't have that place. And we actually had two concurrent HEART meetings or type of meetings. The other one was a group that worked in seeking out housing opportunities, areas, you know, building that housing inventory. But because that wasn't quite established, it kind of withered, you know, kind of strategically so that we build additional resources. But the goal is to continue a similar system like this. But again, you know, bottom line, we just didn't have the housing because we kept getting a lot of feedback of, you know, where are we going to go to? You know, if we go to down the riverbank, they do a sweep on that area, what are they going to do? They just go farther down. I mean, they're still there. It's just.
So there needs to be a plan for that,
Yeah,
built
so-
into whatever action that comes out of this.
Yeah.
I mean, that just, you know, again, so just to tell you a little bit of where we are with we're calling it core committee. So we had our first meeting, we have another, actually it was yesterday, right? With the jurisdiction, with the providers. So we're starting to, we want to talk to the providers, and have we scheduled the jurisdictional meeting yet?
No.
Okay, so we'll be scheduling a jurisdictional meeting, kind of same thing. What do we want to get out of all of this? Because I think what you raise, Enrique, is very true. And one of the risks of sweeping, and it's funny, Supervisor Alejo sent, I think it was yesterday, sent an email about the Central Coast Water Board, Water District, you know, the Central Coast Water Folks,
Water advisory.
who are very concerned about people moving deeper into the waterways and the impact that has on water, or from agriculture, seeing people kind of move deeper into kind of irrigation runoffs, which can have
other public health issues. And as, you know, at some level, and it'd be another whole section, you could think about the harm reduction side. That the extent, right, you have people by business,
And you can
that's
think
an
of
industry
new
versus
stakeholders that actually
agricultural
have a
industry.
stake in the homeless issue and might even be able to provide resources to help this plan.
But I think you do have to be careful, and it sounds like this is one of the things that San Benito heard, is that you have to be careful about moving people into the places where there are even greater public health hazards.
Okay, so me wanting to kind of tie a bow on this discussion, are there any other comments here from the board table? And then I'm going to ask you next, what action are we going to take? Okay, so not hearing any comments.
Can I suggest an action? It sounds like you want some edits that you want me to bring back for the next meeting?
Yes.
Including a copy of the
Previous decision.
position.
Okay, is everybody okay with that? All right.
Thank you for your input, actually.
We're
It's
good.
very useful.
This is very great discussion. I really appreciate that a lot. Okay, now we have a discussion ensuing about the MIIS, the Middlebury Institute CARS assessment. I believe that's a presentation or discussion, yes?
And Roxanne, you want to tee it up, or do we just send it off
I
to
can.
Ed?
I'll introduce you, ladies. Thank you. So in 2017, HUD finally released an official guidance on coordinated entry. One of those components is that annually we should be doing some sort of evaluation. They listed off many different types, but some sort of evaluation on our coordinated entry system. So we partnered with Middlebury Institute with their advanced evaluation, program evaluation course. Their instructor, and that they do an evaluation on our compliance. Because this is our first one, I think that we at least needed to set a bar as if we're even doing it right. So I would like to introduce you to Elizabeth and Rose. These are the students who worked on it. Inside of your packet, you'll see a copy of the evaluation. All right, ladies. Have at it.
Yeah, thank you. Again, my name's Elizabeth and this is Rose. Please feel free to ask us questions as we continue through the presentation. We'll try to keep it short since I know we're trying to run behind. But just to start out, we'll go over kind of our methodology, the background, where we're coming from, our perspective with this evaluation so that it's clear. Obviously, we're coming from a pretty limited perspective because we haven't sat in on any of these board meetings in the past. You know, a majority of the data and the information that we received was either written policies or discussions with Katrina, Nicole, Derek, and Roxanne. That we tried as best as we could with the information that we had to get kind of a more holistic view and evaluate the CARS assessment from kind of an outside perspective. That being said, we kept in mind the mission of the coalition throughout the evaluation and consider the role and the position of the coalition in the coordinated entry system. We also kept in mind the 4 different parts of the process, of the CARS process. So we at first thought that we were going to do it or evaluate it in a way where we just separated each of these sections, but we decided because they're so interrelated that we were just going to look at it from a little bit of a different perspective. So we divided our questions in 3 different sections. The first was compliance, which was the main purpose of the evaluation. Second was effectiveness, and the third was process. So process really kind of focused more so on the satisfaction of partners and clients. We'll discuss a little later about how kind of this was especially difficult for us considering that we had limited partner and client engagement. So the methodology that we employed during the evaluation was we wanted to make this a formative evaluation. So essentially what that means is that we were considering this as a kind of a new program that is still being evaluated, still being under evaluation. You know, we're looking to improve this as opposed to it being a summative. You know, it's not the end of the program. We also really wanted to engage stakeholders. Like I said, we had limited access to stakeholders in general, but we try to make it as participatory as possible. We also wanted to make sure that we considered both the qualitative and quantitative information. So we wanted to understand the dynamics, the relationships, as well as understand the numbers. Finally, we wanted to make it a joint learning process. So we weren't just learning, but the coalition staff was learning with us. We wanted to make sure that both of us understood from both perspectives that we're both learning from this process together. So our primary limitations during this process, both Rose and I were students, we just graduated, but we were, thank you. So we were students, so we were working on many other things. We had other jobs and whatnot, so that is a first limitation that I want you all to be aware of. We had limited time and resources generally, but in addition to that, survey responses were pretty low, which we anticipated with regards to clients. However, we did not anticipate the low participation rates from partners, which was really disappointing to us, not to shame completely, but
just a little bit.
But it was hard for us to completely, I mean, at the end, I think we got a 29% response rate from partners with regards to the surveys that we had sent out, but we did anticipate more involvement. In addition, the surveys that we sent out to clients were sent via email, so we recognize that this is the clients that did respond, the people who were experiencing homelessness that did respond to these surveys were biased in that they had access to the resources to respond to the survey in general, like internet and a phone. So we realized that, you know, we're asking these questions to the people who probably are not the most vulnerable in this population with regards to clients. And finally, as I've mentioned before, just the limited stakeholder engagement. We really tried to, we started off this process with maximum stakeholder engagement involved, but we ended up not being able to do so. So that definitely limited our perspective and the information that we received. So this was the kind of timeline. It's in the evaluation. We started off in September. And our primary data collection methods, we employed surveys, interviews, and observations, again, primarily with Katrina, Roxanne, and Derek. And the stakeholders included partner agency assessors, a few of the partner agency administrators, clients, which are the people who are or have experienced homelessness, as well as the coalition staff.
All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we found. So I'll break this up into findings for compliance, which are based off of the CAR's written policies and procedures, observation of a training, and semi-structured interviews throughout the process with Roxanne and Katrina. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we found in our surveys, as well as some of the data on the referral process. So the way we went about this for compliance, we basically compiled 50 policies, 50 of the most important HUD requirements, and we had this huge Excel sheet where we had the policy, we decided how we would measure it, whether that be through the survey, through interviews, or through reviewing the written policies, and then we went through and basically concluded whether or not the coalition was compliant with that policy.
CES?
Coordinated Entry System. So out of the 50 policies, we found that there were only 2 areas of non-compliance. But first I'm going to go through some of the strengths in terms of where we found the coalition was really excelling. With data and confidentiality, we found that the processes and procedures were really well written, really clear, how data is handled, and only partners have access to the data that they need to. And the process of, for example, the ROI was explained really well in the training. Processes for dealing with subpopulations like victims of domestic violence and veterans were also really clear and well explained in the training, as well as in written policies and procedures. So that was another big strength. And then another strength we noticed was the uniformity of procedures. So again, in the training, it was really clear how assessors use the home app, and we found generally that this was a very well-structured, uniform process. In room for improvement, these policies were followed to the minimum, but we thought that they could be improved a little bit more. So looking at discrimination laws, we thought that the conversation around cultural sensitivity could be opened up a little more and discussed, for example, in the assessor training a little bit more. How are we culturally sensitive to clients, and how do we identify discrimination when it does take place? Another thing was language access. In our survey results, a lot of the partners noted that that language was a problem for clients, especially Spanish-speaking clients. So we are aware that the VSPADAT is available in Spanish, but a lot of the partners didn't seem to be aware of that. So I think making that more clear would be really important. And then another area of improvement is marketing. We think that, we'll go into this recommendation in more detail later, but we think that there could be improved marketing specifically for clients on social media and the coalition's website, just reaching out to clients in those areas. And then the two policies that we found were areas of non-compliance were related to the ability to file a non-discrimination complaint. It's important that that clients are aware of this ability from the start of the process.
Can you please define a non-discrimination complaint? It's really discrimination.
It's really essentially what it is the clients have the ability to file a complaint when they feel as though they've been discriminated against. And at this point in time, they don't have the ability to do so. They should have the ability to know from the beginning of this process that if anything happens in any case, if they feel that they are being discriminated against, that they have the access to go online or in some capacity tell the coalition or the provider that they want to file a complaint because they feel as though they've been discriminated against.
So it's a complaint about a violation of a non-discrimination policy.
Exactly.
It's
confusing the way it's worded.
It regards the Non-Discrimination Act.
Did you say there were two areas of non-compliance? Because I just see one bullet.
So there are two policies, both related to non-discrimination, because there's a lot of repetition in the policies, but out of the 50, there are only two.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay, so you guys have the report, so you can look at these survey results in more details. But this is the results from the client survey. We got 27 responses, and as Elizabeth mentioned, there is a little selection bias in these results. And we sent it out to over 700 clients. So that's about a 4% response rate. So we have to take these results with a grain of salt, but they can start opening up the conversation with areas of concern for clients. In general, one of the strengths that clients seem to note about the CARS process was the assessment process. 64% of clients agreed that their assessors were helpful during the process, and 68% of clients said that they felt comfortable during the assessment process. So that was really a strength that showed through in these results. Something that clients seemed more concerned about was the fairness of the process overall. Obviously, this is very difficult. They have to wait on long wait lists. But 40% of clients disagreed with the statement that the process is fair, and only 32% agreed. Another thing was in terms of referral expectations. In response to this statement that referral expectations are reasonable, 52% of the clients disagreed. So that would be documentation requirements, contact they had to maintain, or traveling they had to do. This is something that we recognize might be hard to change because of all the policies, but I think it's something worth further investigation in terms of why do clients think this is unreasonable, and if there is something we can do about it, what would that be? So in the partner survey, I'll just try to summarize the best I can to be aware of time. But one of the biggest strengths that partners noted was the assessment process. Themes came up several times about how the process was easy. A lot of us partners agreed that the home app was intuitive and easy to use. And I think 78% of partners agreed that the training prepared them well to administer the assessment. So again, the assessment process came up as a real strength for partners as well as the clients. I won't go into all of these in detail, but we had some qualitative open-ended responses for partners as well. And one of the themes we noticed in terms of some of the cons of the process was just a general sense of frustration with the long wait lists, partners, assessors who had clients come back to them and ask where they were on the wait list, and kind of just a sense of hopelessness a little bit and low morale among the assessors. So this is something we're going to talk about a little bit later, but we think it's important to note.
How many partner surveys?
We got 50. So that's 29%.
Out of about 130.
Or 180.
Well, can I just make a comment to that?
Yeah.
Like, I got asked to do this, and
Yeah.
we don't participate in CARS. So you guys should go back and look at everyone who was asked. And Dana got asked too, she doesn't participate in CARS. So this idea that you got a low response rate, you need to go back and make sure that everybody who was asked is actually participating
There
in
should have been a
CARS.
clear definition of who this should have been going to,
Yeah.
so you don't feel ignored. When I looked at it,
Yeah.
I said, not me.
I have no answer.
Gotcha.
If I may, the way they got their emails was it was pulled out of home. So somehow, for some reason, home believes you're a user. So
There's another problem.
That's a problem.
And we've scrubbed that list. So if you, I don't
But
know.
Roxanne, the email we got, I think, was from you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was like a please fill it out.
Right, but,
Okay. I just want to make sure you guys are counting the right.
yeah.
No, that wouldn't have been from.
That wouldn't have been.
Okay, so they were using a reduced
Yeah.
targeted.
See if I got it.
Yeah, we sent out a few reminder emails to the board,
To every
board when we
staff
just
to
had
do
very
it.
few
Okay.
responses.
Okay, fine. So what, I just forwarded on to people who actually use the tool, because I think I received it as well.
Okay.
So, but I have a question.
Yes.
You're neutral. What were the instructions for filling out agree, strongly disagree? Was neutral, I have no opinion, or if you go either, I mean, what were the instructions for the respondents?
We didn't have any instructions with regards to neutral, and we recognize that this is kind of a tricky case because neutral could mean a lot of things depending on the perspective. It could mean, exactly, it could
Or I
mean that
don't
they don't
feel either way.
understand, it could mean they don't understand the way the question is phrased, it doesn't apply to them. However, we felt that it was necessary to include the ability to put a neutral, just because in some cases, people may feel as though it doesn't apply, or for whatever reason, they don't want to
You don't want
respond.
to force them to agree or disagree.
Did we have a not applicable or?
In some cases, we did,
In
however.
the client survey, we did.
Yes.
And you guys can see in the report, there's an exact copy of the surveys that we sent out.
So when you analyze it, you can almost ignore the gray and just look at the blues and the reds on either end of the spectrum.
That's true, yes.
But so to a degree, you also
To
have
a
to look
degree.
at how large
Exactly.
the neutral portion was.
Exactly, because in some
Exactly.
cases, we noticed that, for example, this first question here, the CARS process meets the cultural needs of families and individuals. The fact that it has such a gray area, although it doesn't say whether they disagree or agree, it's still something of concern that that amount of people are saying, are responding
They're not
as
sure.
neutral. Exactly.
So then I look at that and I'm concerned about the last item.
This is actually good. This is, I witnessed CARS assessors discriminate against clients. So 90% disagree, so that's really good.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. It's not red, which is bad, but it's a good positive.
It's a good red.
Trick question. I had that same thought I was gonna
Did you
say.
But again, all of that is included in the annex. If you have any additional questions, we're happy to answer them.
Really good.
Okay, so we also took a look at some of the referral data through the master list. So in all of time, this first graph shows the percentage of clients housed from the master list. So since its initiation, almost 20% of clients have been housed. That's 656 clients. And then you can see the breakdown of, out of those clients, who's a veteran, who's a young person, women, men, etc.
Is that all youth, or other companies on those youth?
That'd be like transitional age.
Okay.
Thank
Is that is that housed in transitional or permanent housing?
Yes.
Any housing or just
Yes.
any housing?
Any housing.
During police transition.
Yes. And then the average wait time from assessment to housing is 269 days.
That's a long.
But it doesn't include shelter, the shelter has no.
No, it does not
Yes.
include shelters. So, I mean, I'm sure as all of you have experienced, it's a long wait time, but to see the actual numbers.
Do you have any way to tease out for that? If you go back to the client survey.
And
Right,
I
you
need
know,
to
I'm-
interject, I need to be the nasty person and say we're really running out of time here for the rest of the meeting, so we may not want to get too much into analysis while we're doing.
We'd be happy to discuss it afterwards.
Yes. Okay, so also looking at some more data out of all the clients that have been removed from the master list. This was just looking from January to November of this year. Some of the reasons that they've been removed, 33% were unreachable. That's just something important to note. As well as all of the referrals that have been made are shown in this table. And as you can see, 60% were accepted by clients. And interestingly, 33% something happened where the client could not be reached. So this theme of not being able to reach clients seemed to really come up here.
It's very consistent with what we do at local schools.
And about 19% of referrals were declined by partner organizations, but I was able to go through and see some of the common reasons, and a lot of the reasons had nothing to do with the client, but more just not being able to reach the client or having a missed appointment. So again, that seems like a constant struggle.
Okay, to kind of try and wrap up, I'm going to go through these a little bit quickly, but again, feel free to interject if you have any questions. First, the conclusions that we found with regards to compliance was the fact that the written policies and procedures were very comprehensive, very detailed, very useful. We also found that those 2 requirements were missing from the 50 requirements that we had compiled, and both of those had to do with the non-discrimination complaint. Finally, we found that there was room for discrimination, room for improvement with regards to discrimination in marketing, as we had discussed previously. Additionally, with regards to effectiveness, obviously it's really difficult to reach clients generally because of the complexity of the situation, because of the limited resources, because of the situation that most of these people are in. As well as one of the questions that we had asked, to what extent does the referral system meet COC efficiency goals? We found that essentially there really weren't many efficiency goals that we could see, that we could visualize. And that was, although we couldn't answer this question because we found that there were limited efficiency goals, we felt that it's still important to mention at the end because there could be potential to create more target goals which might be helpful with the program and the organization as a whole.
So conclusions for the process, most clients that did respond were satisfied with the assessment process, but some expressed concerns with the referral process and the fairness of the whole process. Partners expressed high levels of satisfaction with the home app, and so they felt prepared to administer assessments. But we did note this sense of low morale among some partners who expressed concerns about the efficiency and fairness of the process.
All right, what do we do, or what do we suggest you do about all of this? First of all, obviously the non-discrimination complaint is something that you need to add into the PARS process. We recommend that you can add it in the beginning of the assessment, just to let them know in that opening statement you have the ability to file a non-discrimination complaint. Make sure that you explain it in a way that they understand, and also provide the steps in order for them to understand ways to go about filing that non-discrimination complaint. Additionally, we highly recommend that you guys, I understand that this is a really bureaucratic thing, this is a really bureaucratic organization and program, but I think that we think that there is room for creativity regarding the conversation around discrimination and opening up the room for, or the table for self-reflection and discussion about what exactly is discrimination, because obviously we all have biases coming from different backgrounds, different perspectives, and although discrimination carries a really negative connotation, there are things that we do every day that could potentially discriminate unintentionally against people. Additionally, increasing the marketing and advertising strategies. You'll see greater detail in the report, but essentially we recommend that you utilize increasingly the poster that you have available regarding the CARS assessment process, because we tried to look for it, we couldn't really find it, and perhaps increasing this marketing and this advertising of the process could increase accessibility to a person's experiencing homelessness.
Okay, so some recommendations regarding process. Our first was to improve internal COC dialogue. So we do recognize that you guys have a board with different partner organizations, and that you've made efforts to have roundtable discussions with different partners, and that's been difficult just because everyone's so stressed out and there's a lot of work to be done. But we really think this is important, and that there are more mechanisms for assessors and people in all different levels of the organization to have a say in this process and to really continuously get their feedback. So one idea we had was to hold maybe like a monthly roundtable discussion and maybe have a partner organization host that, so that they were really invested in a theme, and maybe a discussion could be about one problem that assessors see, such as the long wait times, or how do you reach clients more effectively. So having really targeted discussions with different people throughout the different partner organizations and focusing on that more. Another thing could be doing more partner surveys just throughout, just more frequently to get more feedback consistently. And then secondly, this is related, addressing low morale amongst assessors. One idea we had was just generally celebrating more wins, because you guys are doing awesome work, and that should be celebrated. So that could mean, for example, doing a feature on clients who have successfully gone through your programs, and sending that to all of the partners so that we see the progress that's being made. Another idea, and this is related to setting the target goals, would be to send in a newsletter the amount of clients that have been housed, and sending that progress so that people feel like they're working towards this shared mission.
Finally, just going back to efficiency and effectiveness, just increasing data collection for future evaluations. We found it a little bit difficult to compile the data and therefore to analyze it, as well as considering other data management methods, especially for you, Katrina. We saw how difficult it is going through that master list, how difficult it must be keeping up with the data dumps and everything. We just feel like there must be, hopefully, another way to go about this, finding another program or something where it inputs the information automatically. That could completely increase the effectiveness of the organization as a whole, and maybe this is due to limited resources, which we completely understand. But we think that could save a lot of time overall. Yeah, and that is what we have. Any questions? Also, we want to thank you guys for being so helpful and so involved throughout the process. We found it really easy to communicate with you all. So thank you.
Yeah, we learned a lot.
That was really helpful. You've done a great service for the coalition. We really appreciate what you put together here. Very professional.
Thank you.
Can we get a copy of the presentation?
Yes.
Like this?
Yes.
That's the full
That's the full report, but I'd like the summary slides.
Sure. I'd like to see it too. I think that would be good presentation material for my board and whatever have you. I'm sure everybody agrees. Okay, so we have a lot of agenda left and not a whole lot of time. So I am going to ask that we limit the discussion of establishing a committee to review the COC ranking tool by just establishing the damn committee and moving on. That's one way, and then Elliot has got a lot of briefings here that we had originally suggested 20 minutes for. We're gonna have about 4 minutes. And we're gonna have to skip the HEAP updates and the agency updates unless we decide to go over into the full business meeting timeframe. So we got a lot of, hurry up and get this good information out. This is all important information. I don't want to minimize it. I just want to get through it as fast as we can. So, Elliot, what did you have in mind for establishing the committee?
I was thinking that we have, some of the executive committee should help me with this, but we have an executive committee member on the kind of to review the ranking tool. We have another participant provider on the decision-making body. I think we looked at least one public partner and at least one funding partner.
Yes,
I
think that's the complete.
And then staff, so 5 total. So, and from the executive committee, I'm trying to remember, I think it was Anna. And then we would want a provider who's been through the COC ranking process.
So that would be a volunteer from the table.
Volunteer from the table. From the funding community, we thought about Laura Lee Alexander or Laura Lee Alexander from the Community Foundation, or Katie Castagna. Laura Lee is not available from United Way, one of those two.
So both of them having knowledge of how to rate and rank funding proposals.
Kind of, I'm a little bit torn, Enrique, between going, I kind of feel obliged to say, can we go to Monterey County for a public partner? Obviously, if San Benito wants to be part, we wouldn't exclude you. For the variety of Monterey County-based programs, I would look at either, again, either Anastasia or Laura. And I'm trying to read Roxanne's expression.
So let's make a choice.
Is it unethical to have the people who are getting graded be the people writing the grading tool?
I think.
I don't think if we mix them into the rest of the cohort, it's going to be unethical. I think it's important that we have the user's perspective on how this tool should work. So if we were just going to them exclusively, yeah, that would be a conflict, but we're not. So, you've heard what needs to be filled from this table. I ask for volunteers.
I heard 4, and you said 5?
Oh, staff.
For the staff member. So let's first call for volunteers.
Kind of a comment, I know you didn't want a discussion. There's so many different kinds of providers, like from a veterans perspective, could a group, with or without a participant provider, draft a tool, and then could the providers just provide input on that? So that you get broader perspective from the providers?
It's possible, it's just a matter of capacity. Or do we actually have the time capacity to be able to do that?
But I think provider input's important. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we want to do. Provider input. It's just to get the input. I mean, obviously, it will have to come back. It will be a leadership council tool.
Sure.
Because then we're trying to figure out a way to make some recommendations to leadership council.
Okay, call for volunteers. Somebody volunteer before I start pointing fingers.
Throw my hat in the ring.
Okay, so provider that participates in the process.
Executive committee.
Or executive committee. No,
Oh,
that's
we already
not
have executive.
You've got executive committee.
There's another provider that participates. Then we would reach out between Laurel and Katie next, and then reach out between Anastasia, Lauren, and Ronald Smith from public sector.
Okay, and Stefan, we got it done.
Yeah.
Okay, we're done. Thank you. Anybody else want to be considered to be on the committee? I don't want to just shut it off. I just want to move quickly. Okay. Elliot's going to launch into the Continuum of Care Coordination updates, but we're going to move necessarily.
Yes, okay. Rewrite 10-year plan, rewriting of the 10-year plan. We are working with the, both counties on rewriting the, getting a rewrite of the 10-year plan. We have 3 quotes in. We are hoping first week of January to have follow-up questions for the providers or for the potential facilitators for the plan rewrite. I don't want to go into who they are or any of that because I don't think it's kind of important for this table, but we do have 3 providers. We believe we have funding, although it just has to be tied down. Rewriting the 10-year plan. You know, at some level, the past ones always had the critique for being fairly ministerial around making sure that we meet our COC goals. Rewrite will have to be a little bit more practical. You know, I think my recommendation for the team was let's pay less attention to something that looks good on paper and more attention to something that we know we can deliver. And then particular brings in some of the partners where we haven't had as strong a relationship as we wanted, and that's particularly around the discharge planning, right? Which is discharge from incarceration or discharge from a health provider. Okay. Likewise, it's time to start thinking about the 2021 PIP. You know, January is the time frame, so we're also going to convene the same group of San Benito County, Monterey County, and coalition staff to see if we can't figure out kind of a way to make sure that we do have as strong a PIT as possible that helps. At least, if nothing else, there was a lot of critiques that came from around the kind of the 2019 PIT that at some level, if we're starting now, we still will get distracted by HHAP, but HHAP? Oh, point in time census. So that's coming. HHAP is also coming. We have a leadership council. I want to say it's on January 22nd. Our goal of that meeting will be to have a rough plan for HHAP to go forward. It doesn't have to be a concrete plan. We'll have to have our application in. We'll have to create a budget that says money in these few buckets, although it's important to keep in mind that that's just a placeholder. When the Leadership Council actually comes up with their financial funding decisions, we can reallocate the funds where need be. And that's the same thing that we did with HEAP. We do have a wrinkle that's emerged. I don't know where it's going to go. I'm sure Monterey County and San Benito County, I'm hoping, are starting to have conversations about what they want to do. But it looks like from preliminary allocations, so you understand HEAP, there are 3 buckets of money, one that goes directly to the COC, one that goes to a county, and for very large cities, of which there are none in our continuum of care, there's a chunk that goes to the city. So throw out the last point, chunk that goes to COC, chunk that goes to county. We have 2 counties. What the state is proposing to do, I don't know if it's finalized yet, they've certainly given our staff, Nicole, some pushback, but they said the advice that they got was to, since there's no better data between counties, and it's a multi-county jurisdiction, just to divide the county pot by how many counties are in the continuum. So it's 50-50 San Benito, Monterey. My suspicion is that has some issues for Monterey. And it's like, San Benito, woohoo, we've scored. But that's kind of a late breaking, oh, what do we do about that kind of issue?
Well, we're still hoping the state could fix that technicality.
That would be ideal.
It's just mathematics.
Yeah. And for our county, we actually do have, for our COC, we have county-specific counties. So it should be doable. But I don't know if that's for everyone.
And the money's in the pots? Can we go over that?
Oh,
The amount?
it was like 3.2 million for COC?
Yeah, something closer to 3.4.
3.4
Yeah,
for the COC.
And then 1 point
Wasn't that included in the email?
I can't remember. It's something like 1.4 million for each
For the
of
counties?
the
So
counties.
2.8 for the counties,
Yeah.
and, okay.
And just keep in mind, it's a 5-year window. It's not, HEAP was a 2-year window, this is a 5-year window, so the funds both numerically are smaller and the period of time to utilize those funds is longer. So just keep that in mind. Monterey County gives, we're chugging along. I think we're at about just over 3,000 total. For any board members that haven't given yet,
Let me please encourage you, implore you, pretty much beg you, we would really love to see 100% participation from board members in this. And it doesn't really concern us so much how much you give, although of course your intention should be as generously as you can. It's a matter of being able to claim 100% board participation when we write other grant proposals. So this is a perfect opportunity. Your contribution gets matched, and I wouldn't want to pass this up. And this is a great way to start off the new year with us being able to write stronger grant proposals.
and the final update, just on the HEAP purchase of equipment, and Robin and Nicole will have to help me out a little bit because my brain is a little bit moving fast. But our contracts for HEAPs basically say that if capital equipment or equipment with a useful life that's purchased under the HEAP contracts that are out there will revert to the coalition at the end of the funding cycle. We don't want your equipment. We don't know what to do with it. So we're probably going to have to amend all the contracts to use that language out, or do some sort of letter to say, we don't want your equipment. We also may adopt an equipment policy bring an equipment policy to the next board member to say, we don't want your equipment. But we'll also, the language says, follow the coalition's policy. We don't have a policy that it says to follow, so we'll have to do that. And we'll also kind of weigh out with our attorney whether we just actually also change the language in the contract itself, because we do not want it.
But we also need language in contracts so that that particular clause is not exploited intentionally or unintentionally by agencies that just want to purchase equipment. So,
And we've, I've drafted some language that essentially says that, any surplus, any equipment with a useful life after the end of the contract will be sustained for programs consistent with the intent of HEAP. I mean, that's kind of what most public contracts say about equipment. That you can't just transfer it somewhere else, keep it within the intent of the program.
We're looking for that language, because that language will be in our contract, our subcontract with Gathering for Women, since they're receiving a ban. And so I did use the language in your email, but if that's gonna change, I need to know.
It'll change a little bit. I think, Jess, you sent me something, or someone sent me some language that they use in there.
I sent you something from our construction.
Thank you. It was Betsy. I knew I saw someone there.
We're looking to complete that agreement as quickly as possible, so if we could get that language or something very close to it.
Yeah. We'll draft it, and then you can use it. But, in general, the principle is keep it consistent with the use of the funding.
Right, exactly.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm going to bypass HEAP updates from the agencies. But I am going to put Nicole on the spot. Hi. Do you have anything to say about what agencies are doing with HEAP funds that can be basically blurted out in about 30 seconds?
Yes, so there are a few programs that are going to be getting started. CHS, the street outreach program, they did just get their vans. Woo, so they'll be starting strong. I got to visit CHS, I got to visit San Benito, and I'm really excited and really happy about everything that's happening there. Everyone seems super prepared. I'm ready to visit HRC Cecil, and I have the year-round shelter I still have to get to, but the emergency shelter is ready to get started on construction. They already have the Avila company there, and they're getting started. They have the little flags and everything. It's awesome. So yeah, everyone's I think everyone's gonna hit the New Year's running and starting to draw down funds, so.
Perfect, thank you, Nicole. Okay, and unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time for agency updates, but I would like to wish everyone a very happy holiday season, and I hope that the staff and all of your agencies that are doing such tremendous work are being able to take some time to be with their families, to do some self-care during the holiday season, and to count their blessings that they are able to serve people in such a tremendous way. Thank you very much. I will now I will now adjourn the COC coordination meeting.